The world remembers the story only in fragments now, scattered like petals carried by a wandering breeze. But if you listen closely, softly as though pressing your ear to the pulse beneath creation, you can still hear the trembling whisper of how it began, with an Apsara whose beauty could unravel constellations, and a mortal king whose longing rose like incense toward the heavens. Their names, Urvashi and Pururavas, linger in the spaces between breaths, in that delicate place where desire meets destiny. Their myth is not merely told, it is felt, like warm fingertips gliding along the inside of the soul. And so, before their paths cross, before the ache of separation or the sweetness of union, the story invites you into a world suspended between earth and sky, where love is both forbidden and inevitable. Imagine the celestial gardens where Urvashi first took shape, her form woven from starlight, river mist, and the quiet music of longing that lives inside all beautiful things. She danced not because she wished to be admired, but because her movements were the natural language of her existence, fluid, serene, shimmering like moonlight over water. Around her the heavens bloomed in colors untouched by mortal eyes, petals drifting in slow spirals as though reluctant to fall away from her presence. The air there carried the scent of night-blooming flowers whose names only the gods could pronounce. Time moved differently in such a place, as though the universe paused to watch her. Below, in the realm of mortals, Pururavas ruled with a quiet intensity, a man shaped as much by tenderness as by strength. The people admired his discipline, his devotion, his sense of justice. But beneath the surface of his noble composure lived a longing he could not fully name, a sense that life was offering him only a partial truth, that the world was beautiful yet incomplete, as though something vital hovered just out of reach. At night, you would walk the palace terraces alone, above the sleeping city, looking at the sky as though someone there to look back. He never admitted this to anyone, not even to himself, but in those hours his heart stretched upward toward a world he had never touched. Perhaps that is why their story feels so inevitable. Some souls, even worlds apart, lean naturally toward each other like two flames drawn into the same soft wind. Urvashi, though divine, carried a beauty touched by fragility. Apsaras were creatures of pleasure and art, meant to dance, to inspire, to drift gracefully through the currents of heavenly desire. And yet, Urvashi often found herself retreating from the admiration of the gods, seeking instead the quiet edges of the celestial realm. There where the sky softened and the air hummed with secret dreams, she felt something stirring in her, a desire not for praise, but for connection. It was a strange yearning for someone she had not yet met, someone who existed only as a rhythm inside her chest. She wondered sometimes what it would feel like to be seen not as a marvel, but as a being whose heart could tremble. The myth begins here, in this mutual yearning neither yet understands. It is the foundation of their entire story. Two beings separated by the gulf between heaven and earth, each sensing the other's pull long before the moment of their meeting. It is the first whisper of divine passion, so subtle you might miss it unless you listen with your whole body. And yet it is enough, more than enough, to set destiny in motion. The world at that time was delicate and vibrant. Mortal kingdoms glimmered with festivals, music rising into the nights like offerings. The rivers swelled with monsoon rains, and forests breathed with ancient spirits. But threading through that earthly beauty was an unspoken rule, as old as creation itself. The divine and the mortal were never meant to entwine. Connections between their realms were carefully guarded, for such unions could disturb the fragile balance between desire and cosmic order. And so, when the myth tells you that Urvashi and Pururavas were destined to meet, it is not speaking of a gentle fate, but one laced with danger and longing. The pull between them was irresistible, not because it was permitted, but because it defied everything that should have kept them apart. Their story matters because it reflects the most vulnerable truth about desire, that sometimes the heart seeks what the world says we cannot have, and yet we reach anyway. The first spark of their tale ignited long before their eyes met. Urvashi, during a sacred rite, whispered a prayer, not for victory or wealth, but for understanding. An unusual request that rose through the sky like a trembling note. In the celestial realm, Urvashi felt it, not the words themselves, but the yearning beneath them, a faint warmth brushing against her like a hand passing without touching. She paused mid-dance, her foot hovering just above the cloud-soft ground. Something within her shifted, as though the world had called her name from far away. In that moment, the myth begins to breathe. You can almost feel the atmosphere changing around them, even though they remain in different worlds. Pururavas senses an unfamiliar softness in the night breeze, something that makes his heartbeat quicken without explanation. Urvashi, for the first time, feels unsteady, her movements faltering in a dance that had always flowed effortlessly from her. The gods around her notice but do not understand. How could they? They have never known the collision of divine grace and mortal longing.
It is here, long before the sensual touch of hand to skin, long before the sweetness and ache of their union, that the sensual tone of the myth reveals itself. Sensuality is not merely in physical closeness, it lives in anticipation, in the slow unfolding of desire, in the trembling recognition that someone unseen is tugging at your spirit. The story pulls you in by allowing you to feel that first shiver of curiosity, of attraction, the one that coils low and warm, promising something forbidden and beautiful. As the myth unfolds, the world becomes charged with quiet electricity. Mortals speak of unusual omens, a bird singing at midnight, a lotus blooming out of season, a streak of silver light crossing the sky in a gentle arc, as though marking a path. Even the celestial realm feels it too. Subtle shifts in the wind, a softness in the distant clouds. Even the gods sense that something rare is forming, though they tell themselves it is simply the natural ebb and flow of celestial energy. But Urvashi knows better. She feels the pull intensify, like a melody she must follow. Pururavas, walking the borders of his kingdom, feels the same. Nights become restless. Dreams become vivid, almost tender, filled with the sense of someone watching him, not with menace, but with yearning. He wakes with the echo of soft footsteps in his mind, the sensation of golden light brushing his skin. He thinks it is imagination, yet it leaves him breathless. And here the myth deepens into its dreamlike tone. Reality and longing begin to blur. The divine brushes the mortal realm not through thunder or miracle, but through sensation, light, scent, whispers of emotion. The two worlds are edging closer, drawn together by forces neither realm can control. Why does this story matter? Because it reminds us that passion, true, deep, transformative passion, often begins in silence, in the spaces between what we know and what we desire, in the delicate trembling before the first touch. It speaks to the strange sweetness of wanting something impossible and reaching for it anyway. You can almost feel the inevitable moment drawing near, when their paths will finally cross. It hovers like a held breath, the entire world leaning in with anticipation. The myth has not yet shown you their meeting, has not yet revealed the fire or the sorrow or the exquisite entanglement of their destinies. But already the sensual mystique is alive. Already you feel the ache of what is coming. And that ache, that promise suspended between heaven and earth, is where their story truly begins.
Urvashi was not merely beautiful. Beauty was only the faintest echo of what she was. In the celestial realm, where every being shimmered with grace beyond mortal comprehension, she still stood apart, as though she had been shaped by a gentler, more intimate hand than the one that sculpted the other apsaras. Her presence was not dazzling in the way sunlight blinds the eyes, but in the way moonlight lingers on water, making the surface tremble with quiet longing. Wherever she went, the air softened, as if it had been waiting for her. Wherever she danced, the sky itself paused to catch its breath. Yet, for all her radiance, Urvashi carried a fragility so subtle that even the gods rarely noticed it. She was a creature born to embodiment, of desire, of grace, of divine seduction. Yet within her chest lived a heart that feared being captured, pinned down, held in place by something stronger than her own freedom. Her spirit fluttered like a bird whose feathers shimmered with heavenly colors, but whose wings had never truly known the weight of love. Perhaps that is why she kept drifting toward the quiet edges of heaven, where the songs of the gods dimmed and she could sit alone with her thoughts. In those stillnesses, she would touch her fingertips to her own pulse, wondering if anyone in the cosmos could ever make it quicken. She longed to be seen not as an ornament carved for divine pleasure, but as someone whose emotions mattered,
whose tremors and hesitations were meaningful. She knew that love could bind even a celestial being, and that frightened her, because binding meant choosing, and choosing meant sacrificing a part of her eternal, drifting freedom. This inner conflict gave her beauty a certain depth, a shadow behind the light, a softness that whispered of vulnerability. The gods adored her. They watched her dance and felt desire coil within them like vines seeking a place to climb. But none of them saw her. None of them noticed the way her eyes lingered on the horizon between realms, or the way she inhaled the wind coming from the mortal world as though it held secrets she could not yet name. She walked among their admiration with a smile that did not quite reach her heart, always searching for something else, something she would not recognize until the moment she encountered it embodied in a mortal king with eyes full of unguarded longing.
Pururavas had no celestial glow, no divine shimmer trailing behind him, and yet there was something unmistakably radiant about him, something that did not come from heaven but from the fierce tenderness of the human spirit. He was a king, yes, but the crown felt secondary to the quiet fire that lived inside him. Mortals often feared desire, but Pururavas embraced it. He moved through his kingdom with a presence that commanded not through intimidation, but through sincerity. People trusted him because he listened. He ruled not from a throne of gold, but from a heart always reaching outward. His passion was not reckless, it was purposeful, a steady burning that shaped everything he did. When he loved his people, he protected them with devotion. When he pursued knowledge, he did so with hunger. When he gazed at the stars, he did so with an intensity that felt almost like prayer. Beneath this noble passion, however, lived a yearning so powerful it almost ached. Pururavas felt the world pressing against him, urging him towards something more than duty, more than the confines of his mortal life. At times he would stand on the palace balcony, the night wind brushing his face, and feel as though someone unseen was reaching back. He was a man accustomed to responsibilities, to the weight of decisions that shaped the lives of thousands, but no amount of duty could quiet the strange feeling blooming inside him. It grew each night, a pull from the heavens he could neither explain nor ignore. Some part of him sensed that life had prepared him for something beyond the mortal sphere, something that would challenge everything he had been taught to accept as possible. Though he had never seen an Apsara, he dreamed of a presence bathed in light, of footsteps on clouds, of a voice that whispered to him without words. This difference between them, her fear of being bound and his longing to bind his soul to something greater, was the very thread that would weave them together. But the myth insists on the slow burn, the subtle unfolding, the delicate teasing of destiny before it reveals its heart. Their chemistry did not begin with touch, it began with awareness. On the night their paths first brushed against each other's, Urvashi felt a shift in the air around her, as though someone far below had breathed her name without knowing it. Her heart fluttered in a way it had never done, not even in the presence of the most powerful gods. She paused mid-step, the hem of her celestial garment whispering against her legs, and turned her face toward the mortal realm. A faint warmth passed over her skin, like the first brush of fingers that do not yet dare to hold.
She closed her eyes, sensing rather than seeing the presence of a soul's longing that resonated with her own.
Pururavas, standing on the balcony of his palace, felt something as well. A breath of air touched the back of his neck, warm and electric, and he shivered, not with cold but with recognition. It was the kind of shiver one feels when standing very close to someone who has not yet spoken, not yet touched, but whose presence sings along the edges of one's awareness. He lifted his face to the sky and saw nothing but starlight, yet he felt watched, held, desired in a way that made his chest tighten. From that moment forward, they became attuned to each other. Urvashi found herself dancing less for the gods and more for that unnamed presence she felt tugging at her heart. Her movements became slower, more contemplative, as though she were dancing to draw someone nearer, someone's eyes she had never met. Meanwhile, Pururavas became restless, pacing halls that suddenly felt too small, too quiet. His advisors noticed a faraway glow in his eyes, a softness he had never shown before. Their chemistry deepened in the unseen spaces between worlds. Urvashi would linger at the edge of heaven, gazing downward with a softness that made her chest ache, while Pururavas wandered the outskirts of his kingdom, feeling the air shift around him in faint, tantalizing currents. These sensations were fleeting, like glances exchanged across a crowded hall, but they consumed them both. Neither understood what was happening, but neither wished to break free from it. There is a particular kind of sensuality in not knowing yet wanting, in longing without form. The myth thrives on this tension, feeding it like slow-burning fire. Urvashi felt torn, one part of her aching to follow the call of this mysterious mortal presence, another part terrified of what love might demand of her. Pururavas felt pulled by an invisible thread, one that urged him toward a destiny he could not name, one that made him look at the world as though someone beautiful and unreachable were hidden just beyond the veil. Their attraction was not yet a union. It was a spark suspended in anticipation, the space where desire grows most intensely. And though they had never touched, never spoken, never shared breath, the universe had already begun to bend around them, drawing their souls closer with each passing moment. Their story had barely begun, but already the inevitability of their connection hummed through the fabric of their worlds, whispering promises neither one could resist. The first crack in their worlds appeared not with thunder, nor with divine decree, but with a rule so ancient and quiet that even the gods sometimes forgot it existed. The realms of the mortal and the celestial were never meant to overlap. Desire could flow between them like a hidden current, but union, true, binding, vulnerable union, threatened to unbalance creation itself. And it was precisely this balance, this fragile architecture of distance, that Urvashi and Pururavas were destined to challenge simply by yearning for each other. As their awareness of one another deepened, the gods began to sense the trembling edges of something forbidden. But where the heavens saw danger, Urvashi felt possibility.
She found herself wandering to the boundaries of her realm with increasing frequency, standing on cloud-soft ledges where the sky thinned and glimpses of the mortal world shimmered far below. Each time her breath caught, her chest tightening with an ache she could not dismiss. She imagined the man whose soul brushed against hers like warm fingertips, imagined his eyes, his scent, the sound of his heartbeat. She sensed that he was strong yet tender, disciplined yet yearning, a man whose very longing called her name. But with every whisper of desire came another feeling, fear, delicate and sharp. Urvashi had danced for gods who desired her, yet she had always remained untouched, her heart protected by the certainty that no one could truly bind her. With Pururavas, she felt vulnerable. He did not yet know her face, yet she sensed that once he did, he might see her more deeply than any immortal ever had. And if he reached for her with that sincerity, what part of her freedom would she have to surrender to his devotion? Her deepest desire was painfully simple. She wanted connection, not worship. She wanted to be loved as a woman, not admired as a celestial wonder. But this path, this forbidden attraction, promised to unravel her in ways both sweet and terrifying. In the mortal realm, Pururavas grew increasingly restless, haunted by sensations he could neither explain nor deny. His advisors whispered about omens, about the king's troubled nights and distant eyes, but Pururavas paid them no mind. His longing had grown so fierce that it left him breathless during quiet moments. When he closed his eyes, he felt a presence, soft, luminous, tender, pulling him toward a destiny that lay just beyond mortal reach. He wanted something impossible, to anchor the divine in his arms, to hold a being of light and make her a part of his mortal life. But wishing for such a thing meant challenging the very laws that govern the heavens. Still, Pururavas could not shake the feeling that he was meant, not chosen by the gods, but drawn by fate itself, to find the one whose presence stirred him awake. The more he yearned, the more the boundary between their worlds trembled. At first, it was only a faint shift, the breeze carrying a hint of celestial fragrance, a shimmer in the air that made his skin warm. Then, on a night wrapped in silver moonlight, the boundary thinned so delicately that it became possible, for the first time, for their gazes to collide across the divide. Urvashi was standing at the edge of the heavens, her form glowing softly against the expanse of stars. Pururavas, wandering beyond the palace grounds, looked up and saw her. Not her full form, not yet, but the impression of a woman bathed in starlight, watching him with eyes full of longing. Their gazes locked, and the world around them fell away, leaving only breath, heartbeat, and the trembling recognition of two souls finding each other at last. But the gods noticed, and the heavens stirred with disapproval. The celestial realm was governed by rules older than memory. Apsaras were meant to inspire mortals, but from afar, their touch reserved for the gods alone. If Urvashi crossed the boundary willingly, she would not merely break a law, She would disrupt the balance between desire and duty that held the cosmos steady. And if Pururavas dared reach for her, he would risk drawing divine punishment upon his entire kingdom. Still, the glimpse between them lit a fire neither could extinguish. Urvashi's longing deepened into something undeniable. She felt Pururavas's gaze like warm hands sliding over her skin, coaxing her toward a future she both craved and feared. The more she resisted, the more the desire coiled inside her, delicate yet consuming. She imagined stepping into his world, feeling earthly soil beneath her feet, hearing his voice speak her name. And every time she imagined it, her wings trembled as though wanting to carry her downward. Pururavas, for his part, became consumed by her. Though he had seen only a trace of her form, the vision etched itself into his heart with intoxicating clarity. He felt her presence in the nights that followed, as if she walked beside him in silence, her breath brushing the edge of his jaw. He could not focus on council meetings, on treaties, on rituals. His soul was already halfway in the sky, reaching for her. But desire, when forbidden, has a way of twisting itself into tension. When Urvasi next approached the boundary, she found it flickering like a flame caught in a harsh wind. Divine forces had tightened it, sensing her intentions. She tried to peer through it, to find Pururavas's presence, but the veil resisted her desire. The more she pushed, the more the boundary pushed back, unsettling her with its cold refusal. Her heart pounded, a mixture of yearning and fear. What if she never saw him again? Pururavas felt the shift too. Nights once filled with warm whispers now grew cold. The winds no longer carried her scent. He stood beneath the stars, calling out with longing so raw it nearly broke him, but the sky remained silent. Doubt crept in. Had he imagined her? Was it a dream woven from loneliness? The uncertainty gnawed at him, twisting his desire into desperation. This tension, this impossible distance, only intensified their longing. Urvasi found herself crying for the first time in centuries, her tears shimmering like liquefied stars. She feared losing a connection she had not yet fully grasped. She danced with trembling steps, her movements infused with longing so potent that the heavens grew quiet, watching her with uncharacteristic concern. Her desire for Pururavas was no longer a whisper, it was a storm brewing beneath her delicate exterior. Meanwhile, Pururavas began defying rituals and duties, sneaking away from his palace at night to search for glimpses of her. Each silence from the sky tightened something in his chest. He wanted her not as a distant vision, but as a presence he could touch, hold, protect. He wanted to bring the divine into his life, to anchor her beside him no matter the cost. The gods sensed the growing danger. They whispered among themselves about intervention, about consequences, about restoring order. Some pitied Urvasi's trembling heart. Others feared what a mortal king with such fierce desire might attempt. The tension thickened like storm clouds gathering. And still, despite the danger, despite the distance, despite the risk of divine wrath, neither Urvasi nor Pururavas could turn away. Their longing was too powerful, too consuming, too inevitable. It was in that exquisite tension between fear and desire, between duty and yearning, that the myth sharpened, its sensual pull deepened into something irresistible. For the boundary between their worlds was beginning to crack, and soon one of them would cross it. Their attraction, forbidden and fierce, had become strong enough to challenge the cosmos itself.
The night the boundary finally yielded did not arrive with celestial trumpets or divine warnings, but with a hush so profound it felt as if the universe itself was holding its breath. The sky had the softness of velvet soaked in moonlight, and the air carried a warmth that did not belong to the mortal world. Pururavas sensed it first, a subtle tremor in the wind, a pulse beneath the earth, a shimmer that brushed his skin like the first touch of a lover's hand. He rose from his bed before dawn, guided by instinct stronger than reason, and walked barefoot into the gardens behind the palace. Every leaf glittered as though dipped in silver. Every shadow quivered, pregnant with possibility. Pururavas knew, without understanding how, that she was near. Far above, on the edge where heaven thins into starlight, Urvashi stood trembling. The boundary between realms flickered like a fragile veil caught in a yearning wind, thin enough now that she could see through it as though through water. She saw him, alone, crowned in moonlight, his breath fogging the cool air, his eyes searching the horizon for something only his heart understood. The sight of him unraveled her. For a moment she hesitated. One step forward would break the oldest rules of her existence. One crossing would mean surrendering the weightless freedom of the celestial realm for the unknown gravity of mortal love. But when she looked at him, really looked, something inside her ached with such intensity, she felt her wings tremble. She stepped forward. The veil parted with a sound like a sigh, and the world shifted. Pururavas froze as a glow, gentle yet impossibly bright, unfurled before him. It wasn't harsh like the sun, or cold like stars. It was warm, living light that pulsed like a heartbeat. The air thickened, scented with jasmine and rain-touched petals, and from that radiance emerged a silhouette so graceful it felt like a dream folding into reality. Urvashi. Her feet touched the earth as though the world was soft beneath her, as though it had waited ages to cradle her. Her hair flowed like liquid night, her skin radiant as moonlit silk, her eyes wide with a vulnerability that stole his breath. For a heartbeat, neither moved. The silence between them was tender, trembling, electric. Then Pururavas whispered her name, not because he had ever been taught it, but because his soul had always known it. Urvashi.
She inhaled sharply, her lips parting in wonder. The sound of her name in his voice felt like a hand closing gently around her heart. No god had ever spoken her name with such reverence, such aching devotion. Pururavas, she breathed, and the way she said it made him feel as though his entire life had been a prelude to this moment. They stepped toward each other without thinking, like tides drawn together by the moon. When Pururavas lifted his hand, hesitant, offering rather than claiming, Urvashi felt her breath shiver in her throat. She placed her fingertips against his palm. Heat bloomed between them, soft and consuming, and a low, involuntary sound escaped her, as though the contact had set something free inside her. Her touch made his heartbeat stutter. Her fingers were impossibly delicate, lighter than air, yet burning with celestial warmth. He had imagined her many times, but nothing had prepared him for the reality of her, the scent of her, the glow of her skin, the tremble in her breath. "Are you real?" he whispered. Her smile was soft, almost sad. "I am real only because you wished for me." He reached for her then, gently, asking with his eyes. She answered by stepping closer, closing the fragile distance between their bodies. When Pururavas lifted his arms, hesitant, offering rather than claiming, Urvashi felt her breath shiver in her throat. She placed her fingertips against his palm. Heat bloomed between them, soft and consuming, and a low, involuntary sound escaped her, as though the contact had set something free inside her. Her touch made his heartbeat stutter. Her fingers were impossibly delicate, lighter than air, yet burning with celestial warmth. He had imagined her many times, but nothing had prepared him for the reality of her, the scent of her, the glow of her skin, the tremble in her breath. He reached for her then, gently, asking with his eyes. She answered by stepping closer, closing the fragile distance between their bodies. When he wrapped his arms around her, the heavens seemed to pulse with disquiet. But Urvashi pressed herself into him, resting her forehead against his chest, closing her eyes as though she had finally found a place to belong. His hand slid along her back with reverence, feeling the tension, the fragility, the heat of her longing. She trembled beneath his touch, not with fear, but with overwhelming need. He tilted her chin upward, and the moment their eyes met, the world around them melted away. Urvashi lifted her hands to his face, her thumbs brushing the stubble along his jaw. She marveled at the mortal warmth of him, at the solidity of his body, at the way he held her as though he feared she might vanish if he blinked. Her breath mingled with his, soft and uneven, the distance between their lips thinning until it became unbearable. When they kissed, it felt like the first breath after drowning. Her lips were warm, trembling, celestial. His were desperate, reverent, hungry. Their kiss carried the weight of centuries of yearning, sweet, deep, intoxicating. Light flared between them in soft waves, illuminating the garden in pale gold. Pururavas felt her melt against him, her hands sliding into his hair as though anchoring herself to the mortal realm through the sheer force of her desire. And then the world softened further. The wind stilled. The moon seemed to draw closer. Urvashi's lips trailed from his mouth to his cheek, to the line of his jaw, each touch sending a quiver through him. He held her closer, pressing his forehead against hers as their breaths tangled, hot and fragile. "I should not be here," she whispered, though her arms refused to release him. "I know," he murmured, brushing his thumb along her lower lip. Her eyes shone with longing. "If I stay, I may lose everything I am." "If you leave," he said softly, "I lose everything I've become." The words struck her like lightning, beautiful and painful. She understood then the price of love, that someone must always sacrifice more, that desire is never without consequence. Their lips met again, slower this time, deeper, each kiss heavy with the fear of losing the other. Pururavas lowered his forehead to her collarbone, inhaling her scent as though memorizing it. Urvashi closed her eyes, arching into him, her fingers curling into his shoulders as their breaths grew heavier, their bodies drawn together by a pull older than heaven or earth. But even in their closeness, the threat loomed. The boundary they had defied trembled behind them. The heavens stirred, watching. The first winds of divine consequence began to whisper. Urvashi felt it first, a chill creeping along her spine, a reminder that she belonged to a realm that did not forgive transgression. She buried her face against Pururavas's neck, pressing a kiss to his skin, as though trying to leave a mark, a memory, something that would remain if she were torn from him. "I feel them watching," she murmured. "So let them watch," he whispered fiercely. "I will not let you go." But she trembled, and he felt it. The inevitability of separation hung around them like smoke. One night was all they might ever have, one embrace, one sliver of bliss before the gods intervened. Still, Urvashi cupped his face in her glowing hands and kissed him as though she could burn herself into his soul. He held her close, pressing his heartbeat to hers, willing their breaths to synchronize, willing the night to stretch into eternity. The heavens waited, the garden glowed, and the lovers clung to each other, knowing that the sweetest moments are often born from the edge of loss.
The dawn that followed their forbidden night arrived not as a gentle unfolding of light, but as a quiet judgment. It washed over the world with the pale brilliance of something that sees too much, revealing the truth waiting at the edges of their fragile, stolen peace. Pururavas woke with the warmth of Urvashi's body still curled against him, her breath soft against his chest, her fingers resting lightly, as if afraid that even in sleep he might vanish. But when her eyes opened, luminous and trembling, the sky above them shifted, its stillness breaking like the first crack in porcelain. She felt it before he did, a pull at the base of her spirit, a summons, a reminder. The celestial realm was calling her back. Pururavas sensed the change in her breath. He tightened his arms around her, as if flesh and devotion might anchor a being born of light itself. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence expanded between them, thick with everything they feared would come next. Urvashi was the first to look away, her gaze trailing to the horizon where the first faint strokes of gold painted the edges of night. Her voice, when it finally slipped from her, carried both surrender
and a wound she had no words for. They know, the gods, they know I stayed too long. He swallowed hard, the truth cutting deeper than any blade. Then let them come, let them rage. I will not let them take you from me. A sad, tender smile curved over his lips. She lifted her hand to his cheek, her touch softer than the morning's first breeze. My love, you cannot fight the sky, but I can fight for you, he whispered, his voice already breaking. She pressed her forehead to his, her breath mingling with his in a moment carved from unbearable intimacy. And you have. Every moment we have shared, every risk you took, you fought more fiercely than any mortal has ever dared. But this world, your world, cannot hold me forever. My staying tears at the fabric between realms. If I remain, something greater than us will break. Her words were truth, but they felt like loss wrapped in divine reasoning. Pururavas's hands trembled where they held her, tracing the line of her back, as though memorizing each curve would keep her real, solid, his. Then take me with you, he said, not as a plea but as a declaration. If your world rejects this union, then I will challenge its laws as surely as I have challenged my own. Urvashi closed her eyes, not in hesitation, but in sorrow so profound it felt older than time. A mortal cannot survive the celestial realm. Your soul would unravel, your breath would burn, your heartbeat would be a fragile ember swallowed by the winds that sustain the gods. I could not bear to watch you fade. He shook his head, desperation cracking through his composure. And I am to watch you disappear instead? Her silence was answer enough. A soft hum trembled through the air then, barely perceptible but undeniable. The signal, a thread pulling taut, the beginning of the end they had always sensed was coming. Pururavas pulled her closer, burying his face in her hair, breathing in the scent of flowers that did not grow in the mortal world. Stay with me a little longer, he whispered, just a moment more. She nodded, and the relief in that simple gesture carried the weight of a final gift. They sat wrapped in one another as the light grew brighter around them, as though the heavens themselves were preparing to reclaim what belonged to them. Urvashi's tears shimmered like dew as they traced her cheeks, her sorrow more radiant than any celestial ornament. Her fingers threaded through his hair, her lips brushed his forehead, his cheek, his mouth. Each touch a farewell delivered in the softest possible form. Pururavas, she breathed, her voice trembling the way light trembles on water. Remember me not as a dream that slipped away, but as something that burned with you, something that changed us both. You are not a dream, he said fiercely. You are the only truth I have ever fully known. Her breath hitched, her composure unraveling. If you speak like that, I will not have the strength to leave. Then don't, he whispered. Her fingers tightened around his. For a moment, just a moment, it seemed she might truly defy the order of the cosmos, that love could hold her as surely as divine mandate once had. But then the air around them shimmered, the sky rippling as if a veil were lifting. A soft wind spiraled down, carrying with it the faint chime of celestial bells,
beautiful and devastating all at once. Urvasi's body began to glow, edges softening into light. The sight tore through Pururavas like flame. He reached for her, panic flaring violently in his chest, but her hands were already dissolving into luminescence. "No, please," the words cracked as they left him.
She cupped his face with the last of her forming hands, her voice a whisper dissolved in radiance. "I will return when I can, in dreams, in memories, in the spaces your heart makes for me. Nothing divine is ever fully gone." And with a final kiss, light, trembling, eternal, she slipped from his arms, her form lifting like mist rising toward the heavens. He watched helplessly as her silhouette dissolved into the morning sky, swallowed by light too bright to bear. The moment she vanished, the world dimmed, as though her departure stole some essential warmth from the air. Pururavas fell to his knees, the weight of her absence crushing him with its immediacy. The grass still held the imprint of where she had lain, the faint warmth fading by the second. He reached out, fingers trembling as they brushed the place where she had been, as if he could bring her back through sheer will. But there was nothing. Only the soft hum of the world returning to ordinary rhythm, indifferent to the devastation left in its wake. For days he wandered the palace grounds in silence, his duties abandoned, his crown feeling like an empty symbol of a life that no longer felt like its own. Servants whispered, advisors fretted, but none dared disturb the grief that clung to him like a second shadow. At night, he would look toward the stars, searching for the faintest flicker that might be her. Sometimes he imagined he felt her presence, warmth at his side, the brush of fingers at his neck, the echo of her laugh woven into the rustle of leaves. Whether these were memories or miracles, he did not know, but he treasured each one. Urvashi, too, in the celestial realm, felt the wound of separation. Though she returned to the gardens of the gods, though her radiance remained unblemished, something within her carried the weight of mortal longing. She would pause at the edge of every clouded balcony, gaze drifting toward earth, her heart tugged by the memory of a man who loved her with more devotion than any divine being ever had. Their bond did not dissolve, it stretched across realms, fragile, aching, but unbroken. Pururavas grew quieter, wiser, his rule touched by a gentleness that made his people speak of him not just as a king, but as a man who once held something sacred. In his solitude, he understood the truth of loving something greater than the world itself, that some loves are not meant to be possessed, only cherished, that some connections live on not in presence, but in the spaces they leave behind, and that a heart touched by the divine is never the same again. And though Urvashi could not walk beside him under mortal skies, she lingered at the edges of his life, felt in the shimmer of dawn, seen in the delicate sway of flowers touched by wind, heard in the soft whisper of night falling across the land. Their love did not end, it simply changed form. A mortal king and a celestial Apsara, forever separated, forever connected. a union that defied the heavens and a loss that reshaped a heart. And in the quiet moments when Pururavas closed his eyes, he could still hear her voice, soft and luminous, reminding him that love, even when untethered, does not disappear. It only finds new ways to stay. It is said that some loves do not end when the lovers part, nor fade when time moves forward without them. They linger instead in the subtle places, between breaths, in half-remembered dreams, in the hush of twilight, where the world softens and the soul becomes receptive to what cannot be spoken aloud. The story of Urvashi and Pururavas survives precisely because it dwells in those spaces, refusing to be bound by a single realm, a single moment, or even a single lifetime. Their love, woven from divine radiance and mortal longing, reveals a truth that humanity has always felt but rarely named. That the heart is never more alive than when it reaches for what it cannot fully hold. For what is longing, if not the shape of love stretching beyond its limits? What is desire, if not a testament to how deeply we yearn to be transformed? In the gentle rise and fall of their impossible union, Urvashi and Pururavas become more than myth. They become a mirror held up to every soul that has ever ached for something just out of reach. Their story does not ask us to believe in gods or celestial realms. It asks us to believe in the quiet power of yearning, that fierce pull that makes even the most fragile connection shimmer with meaning. Urvashi, forged of divine light and carried on celestial winds, embodies the essence of desire itself, beautiful, ephemeral, impossible to anchor. She is the whisper that lingers in the air long after the lips have moved away, the warmth that clings to skin after the embrace dissolves. Yet she is not merely an object of longing. She is longing in its purest form, a being who feels deeply, who trembles at the cost of love, who discovers that even immortal hearts can fracture. In her we see the truth that even the divine are not immune to vulnerability. Love renders them as fragile as any mortal. And Pururavas, bound to earth, to duty, to the fleeting nature of human life, shows us the other face of desire, the courage to reach beyond one's limits. His love is not passive yearning. It is a force that reshapes him, sharpens him, softens him. It drives him to defy celestial law, to challenge fate, to endure loss with a heart that refuses to close. He becomes a vessel for devotion that is painful and beautiful in equal measure. Through him, we learn that love is not measured by possession, but by the depth of transformation it creates. And when Urvashi gazes down from her celestial realm, feeling the echo of mortal devotion tug at her heart, she shows us that being cherished is its own form of transformation. Even the divine are touched, reshaped, softened when they are truly loved. Their separation is not an ending, but a shift in form, a transition from physical presence
to emotional resonance. In this way, their love does not die. It simply finds new places to live. And so, in the quiet aftermath of their story, we are invited to reflect on the mysteries it leaves behind. Urvashi and Pururavas loved beyond the boundaries of their worlds, and in doing so, they revealed the deepest truth of all, that desire is not diminished by distance, nor is connection undone by separation. Love, in its purest state, does not depend on permanence. It depends on depth. It lives not in the moments when two souls are together, but in the places where their longing continues to echo. Their myth remains because it touches something timeless within us. It whispers that beauty is often found in what slips through our fingers, that the most powerful emotions are those carved by absence as much as presence. It reminds us that every love, even the fulfilled ones, holds an element of the unreachable, an aspect that keeps the flame alive, keeps the heart awake, keeps the story sacred. And as the tale fades into silence, it leaves us with a final, lingering breath of truth. That some loves are not meant to stay bound to earth. Some loves rise, shimmer, and ascend, leaving behind an ache that is tender rather than cruel, luminous rather than dark. In that ache, in that exquisite pull of what was and what can never fully return, the myth of Urvashi and Pururavas lives on, not as a tragedy, not as a warning, but as an eternal reminder that even the fleeting touch of the divine can illuminate a life forever, and that love, no matter its shape, no matter its ending, is always worth the longing it awakens.
Together, they form a truth larger than themselves, an exquisite contradiction, a love that is both full and empty, fulfilled and denied, present and forever vanishing. Their union flickers like light on water, impossible to hold, irresistible to watch. And perhaps that is why their story endures, because within it lies the universal ache of wanting something whose very nature resists staying. We are drawn to stories like theirs because they echo the subtle tensions we carry within ourselves, the desire to belong and the desire to be free, the yearning for closeness and the fear of losing oneself, the hope that love can transcend boundaries, and the knowledge that those same boundaries are what give love its fragile beauty. Urvashi and Pururavas remind us that love is not diminished by its impermanence. The fleeting nature of their union is not a failure. It is the very thing that renders it unforgettable. Their love is the spark that flares brightest just before it disappears, the memory that warms long after the moment has passed. It is a reminder that the most profound connections are not always those that last forever, but those that leave a mark impossible to erase. There is a sensuality in impermanence, a tender, aching awareness that each touch, each breath, each whispered confession is precious because it cannot be repeated in exactly the same way again. Their love, suspended between worlds, becomes a celebration of that delicate truth. In every culture, across centuries and continents, stories like theirs continue to rise from the depths of human imagination. Lovers divided by fate, humans reaching toward the divine. Moments so intense they blur the boundary between ecstasy and sorrow. These tales endure not because they offer tidy solutions, but because they leave us with questions that resonate long after the final word. What does it mean to love something that cannot stay? What does it mean to be changed by someone whose presence is both gift and wound? Why do we return again and again to the sweetness of stories that promise heartbreak? Perhaps it is because we understand instinctively that longing is one of the most intimate experiences a soul can feel. Longing is the thread that connects the mortal to the divine, the seen to the unseen. When Pururavas looks to the sky, searching for the faintest glimmer of Urvashi, he embodies something profoundly human, the belief that love leaves a trace even when the beloved has gone. That belief, that fragile, stubborn hope, is what allows love stories to endure long after the lovers themselves have faded.